Welcome to the Collage Podcast, a production of Feed My Sheep. Feed My Sheep is a nonprofit in Temple, Texas that has a goal of feeding people that are hungry physically, spiritually, and emotionally. In this podcast, we discuss Scripture, and our hope is that you would be fed spiritually through the reading and discussing of His Word. We're glad you're here. Welcome to the Feed My Sheep podcast. I am here today with Jeff and Jonah, and our passage today is Jesus Calms the Storm. This particular passage is found in 3 of the Gospels known as the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And so we're going to read those to start us out.
Okay, we're going to start out of Matthew, and the version we have is chapter 8, and we're going to look at like 23 through 27. And in the version I have, it says, "Then Jesus got into the boat, and he started across the lake with his disciples. And suddenly a terrible storm came up, and with the waves breaking into the boat, but Jesus was sleeping soundly. And the disciples went to him, and they woke him up, shouting, 'Lord, save us, we're going to drown.' And Jesus answered, 'Why are you afraid? You have so little faith.' And then he stood up and he rebuked the wind and the waves, and suddenly all was calm. The disciples just sat there in awe, and 'Who is this?' they asked themselves. 'Even the wind and waves obey him.'"
Okay, I'll be reading from Mark 4, starting in verse 35. "That day when evening came, he said to his disciples, 'Let us go over to the other side.' And leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him, and a furious squall came upon him, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion, and the disciples woke him and said to him, 'Teacher, don't you care if we drowned?' And he got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, 'Quiet, be still.' And the wind died down, and it was completely calm. And he said to his disciples, 'Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?' And they were terrified and asked each other, 'Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him.'"
In Luke chapter 8, verses 22 through 25, they read this way. "One day Jesus said to his disciples, 'Let us go over to the other side of the lake.' And so they got into a boat and set out. And as they sailed, he fell asleep. A squall came down on the lake, so that the boat was being swamped, and they were in great danger. And the disciples went and woke him, saying, 'Master, Master, we are going to drown.' He got up, and he rebuked the wind and the raging waters, and the storm subsided, and all was calm. 'Where's your faith?' he asked his disciples. And in fear and amazement they asked one another, 'Who is this? He commands even the winds and the water, and they obey him.'"
Okay, so a lot of what I came up in just reading a little bit more about this was, for one, I always kind of want to ask, where is this in the Gospels? Does this happen other places? And there are. So immediately I was thinking of when Peter, there's a storm and Peter walks out on water. So there's actually 2 storm events with Jesus in the Gospels. There's this one, and then a little bit later, in this one, Jesus is on the southeast part of the sea, and he's going to the other side. And the second one is right after the feeding of the 5,000, and it's on the north shore of Galilee. It occurs in Matthew 14, Mark 6, and John 6. So that at least helped my mind kind of separate out, like, wait a minute, I thought Peter, and then I was like, oh, I see, there's 2 storm narratives where Jesus calms the storm. I also was sort of struck in reading about this. So my mind always goes to the Rembrandt painting, if you're familiar with that. It's a really dark, stormy scene that Rembrandt painted. I love that one because there's 14 people in his boat. It's the 12 disciples, Jesus, and then most people think that Rembrandt painted himself into the scene. I love that creativity. But in that visual, he makes it really dark and stormy, and the boat's, going crazy in the storm. What was interesting to me to read through some of this was, as far as the geography, there's like mountains on the side of this sea that have these valleys in between them. And so a lot of commentaries that I was reading seem to think that this wasn't a thunderstorm like we would think of. A couple of reasons they gave for that. One, about half of these guys at least are fishermen, and they would have seen a storm brewing and likely been like, hey, we got to get off the water, things are happening. But the second thing is this area is known for these winds coming down over the mountain through these valleys, and they would hit the water. It's such a violent force, and so it would cause all these waves and this just basically a crazy windstorm that could occur at any moment and completely out of the blue, in that the fishermen, it wouldn't be something that they could predict or see coming based on clouds and things like that. But even one of the commentaries I was reading, the guy was talking about going there in modern day times, and he was standing on the edge, and one of these happened when he was there, and he said, we were 200 yards from the shoreline and completely soaked because the amount of the waves were coming up and the sea spray that was coming off at them. And I was like, wow, that's really hard for my brain to imagine, just wind whipping up out of nowhere like that. And to the point that a boat like this, that Mark passage, the Greek talks about, like it's almost completely enveloped by the waves. That's some pretty tall waves. If you could think about this boat, at the very least having 13-ish people in it, I think it's possible there were more. But that's some big waves.
Well, and like you said, many of whom had spent their lives on the water and on that sea in particular, on the Sea of Galilee, that they were very familiar.
Right.
And for me, like here, in our little area, like, so I've read this because I like water, I like boats. I've had one since I was a little bitty kid. This story for me really took like the physical, the storm. Okay, so we'll just look at the physical thing. Our lake here in this area is Lake Belton, so if whoever doesn't know this area, but it is a lake, okay, so it's not nearly as big as this area they're talking about, but it is very mountainous, like sort of for our little area geographic, it's through valleys, so wind can come through it, runs north and south like lakes do, and I'll never forget it, golly, probably 15 years ago. I fished on the lake since I was little. I've been on the lake a million times, and I was out there one day, and it was in the spring, and fishing with one of my buddies, and everything was calm, everything was fine. I know the weather. I know to watch for storms. There's nothing coming, and we had a really good, not that matters, really good day fishing, one of the best I've had on the lake, and we were coming back. We were heading towards the north, and we were out in the lake, and me and my buddy would look up the way, and it wasn't clouds coming. There was just brown. I couldn't even say. I even said to the guy, I'm like, Steve, what in the world? And you could look up in the horizon, and it was just brown moving this direction, and everything was calm. And as soon as this brown came, it was this big giant front, and it was pushing dust that was from Oklahoma, like it was this, and the wind instantly was unbelievably bad. And so then on the little lake, the waves got really big. The boat was going, like it was instantaneous. And all of a sudden you realize, holy crud, we're fixing to sink. Like you're like, we are in bad trouble. Okay. So everything quickly gone. Even though I had been there a million times, I knew exactly where I was. Everything's gone. Can't see anything. The waves are going. And then if you get sideways in a wave like this boat, so you got one guy who's going, I can't let the bow of the boat not be heading straight into the waves or we're going to sink. That's all he's worried about. I got to figure out how to keep the bow going straight into the winds or we're going to sink. So then we got that. We know we don't even know where we are anymore, even though I've been on this lake a million times. We're fixing to die. Okay, we're not fixing to die. Okay, but it felt that way. Okay, that we were in bad situation, and we didn't know what to do. And long and the short of it, another friend of mine knew that I was fishing in that area and that the storm was really bad, and he was in a bigger boat, and he shows up and finds us. And so then we follow right behind him because he could break all the waves, and then we would go. We made it back. So I'm going on this one. I know what it's like a little bit to be caught in a bad storm and to go, oh, crud. And these are skilled guys in a boat. They had been there for a long, long time. They know what to do. But even in the midst of that, it is disconcerting. And you'd go, if you got the guy who you think is the help and he's just laying in the back of the boat in this, like if I would have had the guy with me and he's just laying there, and I'm like, what in the world are you doing, you fool? Like, get up and do something. And so, like that one for me, just the physical aspect of being in the storm, to understand these guys, like in it, when Jesus rebukes them and goes, don't you have any faith? If you ain't never been in that storm, you wouldn't understand how absurd that question he's asking is.
Yeah.
And you're going, how dare, so like, we'll get to that, but I'm going, it's one thing. And in waves, if you've never been offshore in the Gulf, I've been several times, where waves, you can go down in the trough of the wave, and it can be so far down that you are looking up to see the top of a wave. The power of the water is phenomenal, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so like that, can it be scary? Like in that boat, and one wave that is hit slightly wrong, your boat is gone. And so, and then out of this, keep in mind, okay, so I will say on this, when I read it, I grew up fishing with my dad often as a little bitty kid. He was in a boat his whole life. My dad never had the ability to swim. I don't know why. He never had no sense enough to learn how to swim. If he fell in the water, he would have drowned. Okay? So keep in mind this, that the other people in the boat, there is a probability, like whether they were in the boat or not all the time,
That they didn't know.
they might not have known how to swim. And if the boat gets a little bit capsized, it is catastrophic because they just died.
Yeah.
We don't know that, but you can't not say that it couldn't be a possibility, because my dad fished every single week of his life, his whole life. And if he ever once fell in the water, he would have drowned.
It's interesting to think about the sea and the water and the oceans in this enchanted, period of almost, it's kind of as if they were looked at as having a power of their own, right? Like, and it's still, I think people that really respect the ocean still kind of think that way, like, fishermen and stuff like that. They respect the heart and the spirit of the ocean. And I think this is very much present within the culture. And it's interesting within the Hebrew tradition, who is it that consistently has power over the waters? It's Yahweh who does. And I think we can recall, Moses leading the Israelites out of Egypt, all these people who'd spent their whole life on land in Egypt, and they get to this sea and they're like, what do we do now? Because we don't know how to swim necessarily. Maybe some do, maybe a lot don't. And it's Yahweh who separates and calms the waters. And then we see Jesus do the same thing here. And so I think it's just this very intentional point that the author of Mark is making of, hey, there's this connection between Jesus, the Son of God, having power over the spirit of the waters as well.
Wasn't there even a belief that there were, I should have looked this up. I feel like there was something with dead spirits or evil spirits over the water that they believed happened. I'm thinking that because I feel like I'd read that for the next storm scene when Jesus is out just chilling, walking on the water, and they think he's a ghost. And that sounds absurd to us, but I think it was a very natural thought for them in that moment of like, this is where the bad things live. That must be a ghost, but that sheds light on what they were potentially feeling in this moment of what evil spirit or what bad thing, the sea is, I keep thinking of the Seinfeld, the sea was angry that day, my friends. It's like a bad scene. And how do we get out of this? And he's done great things for people, but to my knowledge, he hasn't done anything
in nature.
Right, in nature. I think this might be the only scene. Do y'all remember that he controls nature,
I think,
so to speak?
I mean, the other one you could say, which you've already brought up, is when Jesus actually walks upon the water.
Yeah.
But other than that, I don't really.
And there's something If you've been in a boat out in the Gulf or out in the Atlantic, Pacific, wherever, and you go far enough out in those bodies of water and you can no longer see land, there's a whole other thing of being in a boat where, I can still see the shore. But
can
when
swim
you get,
there,
I
yeah.
could get there. But when you get far enough out in water, or if you go out in the ocean and in the Gulf, and you've gone 4 hours and you hadn't seen land in the last 4 hours, and you're still heading away from land, you understand in water your place in the whole universe, sort of, and how little you have control over. So out there, whether you like it or not, it doesn't even matter how fancy or nice your boat is or how big your boat is. The ocean is still the power that is in control.
When I was when I was like 11, I went on some jet skis with a friend, and I fell off the back of the jet ski. Like I was hanging on to a friend and fell off the back, and they didn't notice that I'd fallen off. And they and I was wearing a life jacket, but they just like kept going for like 200-300 yards. And I'm like yelling, wave my hand. And they had no idea. Like they didn't realize that I'd fallen off the back. And just that feeling, still having a life jacket, but being in the middle of the lake, like it's like really lonely and like terrifying and
Vulnerable.
Yeah.
Okay. So we start this one at that place. Like this. I mean, it is.
That's what's going on in their minds.
That's right. It's a lonely, vulnerable place. And when it's all said and done, the truth of it is, even to this day, okay, what is the one entity that we know very little about? It's just the ocean and the water and the seas. What is the one thing we can control very little? We put some dams up, but you cannot. Water and these things are still something that is very, very powerful. Okay, and so the perspective of this for the people that were involved, it is lonely, it is scary, and it's everything you have. You can't stop the storm. It's going to do what it's going to do. The boat is, and you're going, oh man, this isn't strong enough to take this. You're not even in control of that. You're just waiting for it to be done and run its course. That's all you can do. People don't like that, okay? And we don't like that at all. And so then the disciples, and the more knowledge you have, like as a fisherman, okay, I would argue the more knowledge you have, the more likely you have to understand what a mess I'm in, and this is really bad.
I would agree. I thought that earlier when you were sharing the boat story. I lifeguarded all growing up and was a swim coach and a decently strong swimmer. But there were a couple of experiences in my life, but one was in the ocean. I was surfing actually, but the waves had gotten so big while we were there, and I fell off, but got pinned between coral and my board underwater. I'm all the while getting cut up because of the pressure of the wave on me, and so my whole backside is just sliced by this coral underneath. I come out like totally bloody and bruised. But it was one of 2 times in my life that I was like, I am not the swimmer that I thought that I was. Like this situation is way stronger than anything I'm capable of getting out of. And
that's people in general. I think sometimes it's like, we're like, oh, well, if you can see the shore, you have confidence you can swim. There's like, most people are pretty incapable of swimming 100 yards at one time. Like that is a feat to like be able to like swim 100 yards and like not have a heart attack in like open water.
Open water is really different than pool water.
It is, it's such a thing. So, yeah. Yep. I want to point out that, I have a note here about just Mark itself as a gospel and the intention of, of Mark, the audience of Mark. And the note that I have here says, let me find it real quick. Sorry. It says that the audience, Mark is believed to traditionally have been written to either Rome or Galilee, maybe Syria, because these places were areas in which people were suffering for the sake of the gospel, or where these churches were suffering. And there seems to be a theme in Mark of normalizing suffering while also providing a message of hope. And during the time, there's persecution happening from Nero in Rome, and also the falling of the temple, if in Galilee. Like if this is written to Galilee, the Jews have watched the temple fall and all of that. And so it seems to be a theme in Mark to normalize or center suffering. And in the same way, I think if we put ourselves in the shoes of an early, not a reader, but a listener of this text, and you're under persecution from Rome, or you've watched the temple fall, and life itself feels like a storm, and you're barely keeping your head above water, that then you get drawn to this scene, this narrative of these disciples, people who are actually in the flesh, walking with Jesus, are literally experiencing these storms. And it's like, hey, people who sat with and rode on this boat with Jesus were also experiencing similar things that you're experiencing. And he can calm the waters. He can bring peace. He can bring hope and an end to that suffering. And I think that's really what Mark is trying to do here with this story and with others as well.
I'm struck by particularly the peace that he brought, that like the storm didn't just subside or get a little less, but it's like instant peace. We used to live in Abilene, and it can get windy here in Belton, but Abilene can have these windstorms like no other. And as a female, my hair's pretty long.
My hair is also long.
Yes, you too, Jonah.
Let's not genderize.
Okay, sorry. As a human with long hair, it would sometimes make me insane when it would just blow if I didn't have something to keep it out of my hair. Like just walking to the car, I remember 2 different instances where I'd barely open the car door and it just, flies out of control, and you're trying to keep it from hitting. Another instance, this one actually happened here. I had my kids were toddlers. I had 2 at that time. I think I was outside of Hobby Lobby. I had the big stroller, got one kid in the car, and as I'm getting them locked in, the wind picks up, and that stroller was like a kite, and it is going all the way across the parking lot. And I'm now like, oh no. And I run, and as I run, the door slams shut on the toddler in the car because the wind's going crazy, and I'm booking it across the parking lot to grab the kite with my toddler. But there's something so incredibly frustrating to me about wind like that, when it's whipping my hair in my face. I can't see anything. And I'm just in my head, I think a lot about this storm of just like, peace. I just want peace. Like, stop this uncontrol of the environment around. And it really is such a picture of chaos and just that disturbing there, which I think in the Hebrew culture was something that they really valued, was the peace, the shalom to each other, and Jesus brought a lack of chaos to their lives that was needed in this world. You talking about Mark also made me think, so Luke is known to be written to a Gentile audience. But what's interesting about them is they would have known these stories of the time of the gods and the kings and these miracle workers who controlled nature in their stories. And so for them, the belief that somebody could wasn't necessarily out of the ordinary, but Luke kind of would have been telling them, no, Jesus is a better controller of these things, and he will meet your Greek god toe to toe.
See, I was thinking about that, and just, as we discussed just a few moments ago, like, we don't necessarily know of any other instances, maybe the exception, and it hasn't happened yet, at least in the narrative of the Gospels, where Jesus walks on water. So his interaction with nature, at least, is maybe unclear. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's this belief in the disciples that Jesus can do something. They've seen him heal people. They've seen him do other, amazing, powerful things.
Last time they were on a boat, he did.
Yeah, true. Right. Yeah, absolutely. But I wonder, it's almost as if when they come down, it's like, you're not doing anything. Mm-hmm. We are all up here fighting with these sails. We got oars out. Somebody's looking for the life jacket. Somebody's looking for the lifeboat. Those weren't things. But you know what I'm saying? Like, everybody's doing something about this, and you are asleep. And it's like, maybe they come with this, like, expectation of, hey, come do something magical because we know you can. And like, we don't want to bother you. You're the last resort. We know that you can make magic things happen. So come and do this. But I think maybe they're just like, you're not doing anything.
Yeah, I wondered what their expectations were because he had been on a boat with them before. He had the miracle of all this fish and come, and they've been walking with him for a little bit now. And yeah, did they have expectations? Were they frustrated? Were they angry? I did see, I think it's Mark that mentions he was at the stern on a cushion.
Important.
And yeah, that's like the sweet seat, in the boat, and where the person of honor gets to sit. And rightly so, Jesus is there. Again, partly why I wonder and think it was probably this freak windstorm because he was asleep. And I imagine when the Sea of Galilee does not have these windstorms, that it's like glass. Now, he had just preached to all these crowds right before this. He'd gone over all of these parables, and I laughed thinking about it. I was like, oh, it's like Sunday family nap time.
Yeah.
He's like, all right, I'm going to take a nap now.
Time to watch the Cowboys.
Yeah.
Right.
nap.
Now that I've preached all morning, I'm going to take a sweet little boat ride and take a nap. But then this violent storm comes up, and I do wonder how frustrated they were with him. The foreshadowing, I think, of the stories before and Jesus providing the miracle of the fish, and then now this. You got to wonder what were their expectations in there. Literary wise, it also makes me think of the story of Jonah falling asleep in the boat. And did later readers think through that? It is interesting to me, the story of Jonah going to Nineveh, but then he's frustrated with the people of Nineveh, doesn't really want to go there. And in this story, Jesus is going across this lake. It is a smaller, I say lake, the Sea of Galilee, but it is pretty small. It's
Yeah, it's not
13
huge.
miles north to south and 8 miles across. Yeah. So it's not huge, but the side he's going to is the Gentiles. And I see a lot going on there from the foreshadowing and the story of Jonah. Was that going through later readers' minds when they read these Gospels of, wait, we know this story. We know there's a man that goes on a boat, falls asleep, has dramatic...
People are like, are you not going to do anything about this? Or
Right.
are you going to help us? Or,
Right. And I think in many ways this shows Jesus is a better Jonah than the way Jonah the prophet handled that story.
both Jesus and Jonah know what's going on, and Jonah's like,
But where they are in the boat matters in the story.
Sure.
Like in it a little bit. So like in this, like if I look at it, so did river guide in another chapter of my life. So raft guide and all
you're
that.
the most interesting person I think I've ever met.
Oh my gosh. So another chapter did that for a bit. And the stern of a boat, it is not the place. Like, so if you're going to put so in a rafting boat, if you ever go rafting, if they put you in the very front, that's the bow of the boat. You're probably decent paddler. Middle of the boat, you're worthless.
Yeah, that's
Stern,
where grandma goes in the middle.
Yeah, grandma goes in the middle of the
Hey
boat,
now.
and so nothing bad against that. But the back of the boat, you have one person in the stern, and you have this thing in the back. All boats, okay. Even now, like the motor of a boat is at the back of it, and it is a rudder. That is how you steer a boat. You are not going to give up the best seat. The most important seat of a boat in the storm is who is in the back at the stern. The pillow was back there because probably wasn't in that boat. That's where the guy who stood, he was there doing the rudder. He had to sit there the whole time and hold this thing, okay, with the sails, because the sails are going nowhere without the guy. So Jesus is probably sleeping on the pillow of the guy who's supposed to be directing the boat. They probably put him there because he is, in our Texas word, we say padron. He is the boss. Mm-hmm. Like he's the one who can handle this. He knows how to do. So he's back there for a reason. The storm comes up, and he's sleeping. And now in the bow of the boat, so Jonah was in a boat. He was in control of nothing, and he's sleeping because he's like, whatever. So the kid in the middle of the raft, you can go through the biggest raft that he can be sound asleep in the rapids. Okay, if I'm looking back and the guide is sleeping in the back and we're fixing to go to a big big rapid, I'm going, we got a big problem.
Yeah.
Okay, wake up, dude. Like, what in the world are you doing? So like that, I look at that and go, okay, on that part of it is it matters where he was sitting to me, yes, because it shows his skill and what they thought about him, because you put people in boats for reasons. And that, so he was back there for a reason. The sleeping, it does matter to me on that one a little bit, and where he was at. But what I like, Kay, I got a question for you. So you got your surfing, you got through all the coral, and let's just pretend Jonah's on the beach over here.
Jonah the prophet or real Jonah?
Jonah, who's sitting
not
next
real-
to me,
this
not the
Jonah.
one who's asleep right now. But so you get out of all this mess, and you just have legitimate reason and thought, I'm fixing to drown. I get out of this. I'm cut up. I'm beat up. I am actually hurt. Because at the storm, these guys probably got thrown around. They probably got bumped up. They're probably got beat up a little bit in the boat. You get out, and you're saying, oh, gosh, somebody save me because I'm fixing to drown. You pop out of the water and you holler to the beach with different analogy, and you say, Jonah, oh my gosh, why didn't you help me? Because he's sitting there lounging on the lounge chair over there drinking his hurricane or whatever. Not that he does that, but whatever. He's over there
out
and
of
he's
a coconut.
lounging, and you see him lounging, and you get out of that and you say, gosh, I was about to drown and you didn't even do nothing. And his answer to you was, why are you afraid? You have no faith. How well would that go?
Probably not well.
Probably not well.
In real life, I was surfing with a group of guy friends, like brothers, and they were all on the shore laughing their heads off at me. And I came out, and they like could not control themselves because I was so bloody coming out of the
It is
water
funny.
that day. It was funny for them.
I just think of the movie Soul Surfer where the girl gets her leg
Her
bitten.
arm.
No.
Her arm? It's her arm.
Yes, it's her arm.
No offense to that person. If
Bethany
you're listening.
Hamilton.
Yeah. That's a thought that I get. I know it probably wasn't that
Well,
bad. but-
so that was a legitimate, that story had not happened yet in life at this point when I was surfing. But I was surfing, studying abroad in Australia, and there were great whites in this water. I had seen them. Not this day, but that was my immediate thought was, I'm bleeding. Get out.
gonna be a
Like,
shark. Yeah.
yes, get out of the water. Get out, get out.
That's crazy. You know what, though? Like, if we take a pastoral moment with just that thing, you know, that whole Jesus saying, like, you don't have any faith. Let me just urge anyone. Jesus can say that to people, but you can't.
Fair.
Thank you.
You know?
Yes, thank you.
And I
Your
think
bros are on the beach saying,
Yeah.
why did you not have faith?
Fair.
like,
Just don't.
And I think Jesus is able to say that because he's Jesus. And really, when Jesus says that, it's not like I don't think it's meant to be at all derogatory.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
fair.
it's an invitation to remember and to trust and to have faith. But I just don't think that there's ever a situation in any of our lives where we could look at somebody going through something and be like, you just don't have really good faith, do you?
I agree. Just like we've talked about the woman at the well, I don't think Jesus was accusatory of, you're right, you've had 5 husbands. Just like I don't hear his inflection in this, why don't you have any faith?
What?
I hear it
Can you
more.
speak in that voice the rest
You're
of the
welcome.
podcast?
You're welcome. I just find it more inquisitive, but I also wonder how much spiritual world stuff is going on that we don't know. Again, you know, we've talked a little bit about their culture and this belief that evil or bad things were over the water. What's really interesting to me about this, we've talked on this podcast some about just the places where the kingdom is leaking in. If I remember right, this is one of the first times he's going over to the Gentile territory on purpose. I don't remember for sure, but at least he's spending a lot of time in Jewish territory. But in this moment, he's going across the sea, and I can't help but wonder if just evil forces were like, not today, you know, we're going to cause whatever to happen. And that if Jesus had that foreknowledge to know it's going to be all right, like nothing can stop me.
I mean, his first landing is restoring a demon-possessed man.
Exactly.
You know?
Yes. And I think that's really important part of this story, that he's controlling these wind and waves. And yes, the very next scene are a legion of demons.
Yeah. We have to add, I mean, because here we're already into this. We've looked at the book, Kate. So, basic question, is this a story about weather? And it could be, because it is. Okay, you can't deny that. It is about a storm. It is about water. It is about a boat. Okay, or does it have deeper implications, or is it teaching us more than just his ability to control weather? What are our thoughts? Because there's many different sermons. Okay, I've heard many sermons on this is about a metaphor for life, and this is how life is. Okay, there's also this. I mean, so where are we at on that? What is this story really showing us? Because it's important, because it's all over the place. We talk about it all the time. I mean, like, and it's okay. This is opinion. So what is it? What is it saying?
I think my opinion is the most important question to ask of this story is, what does this tell you about Jesus? Not so much, I mean, we can go on and on about the geography and the wind and the waves and what it's like to be in water. Could they swim? Could they not? What were the disciples thinking? But at the end of the day, with almost every story in the Bible, I want to ask that question. What does this tell me about God, or what does this tell me about Jesus? I see these gospel writers as it's like another piece of that puzzle of, we've seen him wrestle in different areas with his humanity and healing. And it's like one more piece of that puzzle of, oh, now he's the God of the earth too, like of the physical earth and nature and things like that. But that's important because it affects the disciples and people. He could control some storm out in the Gulf of Mexico where there's no boats, and he's fully capable of that. But I think people are at the heart of things for God. And so I do think that matters, just that it shows us that he is king over the earth of the spiritual realm, which we're about to see in the next story, and how that potentially relates to the natural earth and water. But specifically, I see it saying he is a man of peace, and he brings peace wherever he goes, whether that's with people, whether that's with wind and waves and physical things, whether that's with a demon-possessed man who has a legion of demons in him. He's going to bring peace everywhere.
So with that, so then sticking with that for you, what does that mean to Kay right now in your life? Like, that he is about bringing peace in the midst of storms, that he controls like he can control the natural world, controls the spiritual, but what, like, individually does it mean to you right now?
It means a lot to me. It's been a rough couple of weeks, to be honest. I'm a visual artist, and so sometimes I wouldn't necessarily call them visions, but I like see scenarios in my mind, like a scene. And in this particular last couple of weeks that have been pretty rough for me, I would not say I live here all the time, but I had like a day or two where I was just feeling deep peace despite this kind of storm around me. But the visual I had in my head was, you know, we talked about living in Abilene and my hair going crazy. In my head, it was me on a rock in the middle of the ocean. But what struck me was my hair was not being moved by the wind, even though this storm was all around. It was like a force field around me, and it was not affecting me. I don't know why, but my hair stuck out. Like, it wasn't being even moved by that, even though there were all these wind and waves around me. And so I think when I read this story, ultimately I want to ask him for peace, and to be able to live like that every day would be a gift, despite different storms, you know, that we all feel going on around us.
And then that feeling like for you, like I don't have much hair, so like the feeling of hair that's not coming to
growing
my.
out, Jeff.
Yeah,
Is
that's not.
that something you want to talk about?
Yeah, we need to talk that issue up. But like for that, storm is there. It's bad. There's nothing you can do. How good does that feel? Like, and you look at the disciples, they go, look at that. Even he controls this. It's nice. It's nice to see. My hair's not even moving. Can't be, but it just happened. And you could go, that's nice. And then you can kind of, like the storm was, but like even in the midst of that, then you appreciate the storm a little bit. Don't want to go through it again. But when you got the calm, or you're sitting in the tent on the side of the mountain and it's pouring rain, it's lightning everywhere, but you just got that moment out of it. That storm is not calmed. This one is calmed. Okay, but in that one, just that moment you go, I'm dry.
I wonder what was going through the disciples' head when, in the next scene, when they get, so I'll be honest, the idea of meeting a man with a legion of demons freaks me out far more than a storm in a boat. I'll take the storm every time. Maybe that's my over zealous thinking about my ability to swim. But that scene would freak me out far more. And I wonder if all of this was by design for Jesus to show his power here in one way, and then he's about to go heal a man from a bunch of demons and raise a dead girl.
Yeah. And I wonder if it's almost like for the disciples, like, hey, you guys want to go back to the sea? Because that was better than this.
Right.
You know, like that was less frightening.
Seriously, then
Then
a
what's
legion of
happening?
demons, and then a legion of demons and a bunch of pigs.
Yeah,
like,
and
no thanks.
watching them drown too.
Yes.
You know, and that's how that story ends. We'll
Right,
get
and
to
them
that
going
story,
back
and-
to the sea.
yeah, into the sea.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
a lot going on there of like spiritual world full circle. Did this, when he calmed the storm, did it come out of the storm and
Right.
into this man and then into the pigs and then back to the sea where it would be another storm? I know I got a lot of
The
questions.
circle of spiritual darkness.
So Jonah, what do you see in the story?
Yeah, I think something that just I resonate with is, I think the disciples knew what they want, but they didn't necessarily articulate it, of like, Jesus, please stand up on the boat and wave your arms and calm the waters and the wind and make it a bright sunny day and all of this goes away. They're just kind of like, this is not right. And they just bring that sense of urgency to Jesus without really even knowing what to say besides, this is no bueno. And we are not about this. And Jesus calms the storm. And I think it's, I haven't looked at the Greek on this, and that's, people probably think it's funny because I always go to that. When he speaks to the wind and the waves, consistently, the word in English used is rebuked. But that word isn't used with the disciples. When he says what he says, he's not rebuking them. It's, he replied, he said, he says. And I think there's some intentionality there. And again, like, we would need to look at the Greek, but like, I think the reason it's translated is because there is a firmer, harsher word there when Jesus speaks to the storm than when he speaks to the disciples. And I just think it goes back to, like, Jesus isn't mad. He's not frustrated. He's not angry at their lack of faith. I think it's just an invitation to, hey, here's another chance for you to see and trust me more. And so that's a lot of vagueness about what that means to me. But I think there are things in my life where I'm like, I don't know how to pray about this or ask. I don't know what the solution is to this thing, but this is no bueno, and I am not about this. And this isn't the way it should be. And so could you do something about this? Or do you even care that this is happening?
Fair.
Is my response. And I think there's been times where I've been gently invited to opportunities for faith in the midst of those things. Gently invited to trust. And not rebuked, but just a reply, just a saying, hey, where's your faith at? Don't you trust that I have this taken care of? And for me, yeah, there's consistent moments in my life that I can point to for that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mine on this one, not that it's that. I mean, I don't see Jesus as blasting them, going, man, you're a bunch of idiots. Like, why could you not? For me, I like on this one, I go back, like when I don't think I was in third grade yet, because I was not living in Texas. I was still living in Louisiana. So second grade, let's say first grade, young, whatever age that is. I went out. We were going to go offshore fishing out of Venice, Louisiana with my dad and some friends in a boat. We're going offshore, and terrible fog came in. So I was first grader. So I remember I can't do a whole lot. They put me in a life vest, and and my dad sets me in the boat. He was a big guy, so he puts me in the boat while they launch the boat, all this stuff. So he puts me in the boat. I'm in control of nothing. Okay, I'm a little kid going out, and then we get caught in a fog storm that was really bad. I'm an old man now. I still remember it. And I remember being really foggy, and we didn't know where we were going. And my dad was driving the boat, and we pull over and just anchor, because this is before we had electric. We didn't have GPS. You don't have Garmin. You had a compass. That's it. And so you in visual, you see. And so we pulled over because we didn't know where we were going, and we're just going to wait. And it was really scary. And I remember being going, oh my gosh. And then I remember being angry because he put me in the boat. I would have preferred to be at the house with my mom eating pancakes and staying in the living room, given the choice. And so then there was a part of me, I was like, and then what is a little second grade little kid, he's going to lash out. I didn't even want to be in this boat. I don't even want
I hate fishing.
Yeah, I hate fishing. Why did you put me here? And so
I think that's what Jonah the prophet said.
Yeah. And I'll remember, and when things were tense for him, my dad, he would whisper, like he would get quieter instead of louder. So he didn't whisper like a secret, but I could tell things were decently tense because he was quiet, but he said, I promise I will not let you be hurt. We are all right. And so then I don't remember how it worked out. I don't even know if we went fishing after this. I remember that. And so I knew, okay, you're right. And so out of this, I look at this. There's a lot of times in my life here that I'll look at what's going on. And maybe I'm old enough now. Sometimes I get myself in boats and I head off into places that I shouldn't even have done because I look at clouds that were there, and every sign that says you shouldn't even go out in this boat, I do it anyway. Mm-hmm. But every time I get out in a storm, I always tend to want to go, oh, Jesus, you put me in this boat, and you're the one in the back supposed to be steering it. And so then you go to whatever the goofy little song, Jesus Take the Wheel, or whatever that deal. Not that it's a goofy song. It's a great
Jeff's
song.
ringtone.
Yeah, so it's my ringtone.
Track 2, Jesus Calm the Storm.
But I tend to want to quickly, even though I forget all the things that he has done for me, all the storms that he has walked with me through, the first inkling I want to do is I didn't even want to be in this stupid boat anyway. You're the one who put me here.
Why'd you put me here?
Why'd you put me here? Why'd you put me here? And then my answer is my dad did not say, Jeff, you're a stinking little kid. I've got this under control. He said, I will not let anything harm you.
And even maybe it's like, when we've said yes to something God's invited us to, it's like, I trusted you in coming on the boat in the first place.
Agreed.
So what in the world is this now? Like, I said yes to getting on the boat, and now this?
Yeah.
What are you going to do about this now? Like, my trust was even coming on the boat in the first place.
That's right. So then
and going to the land of the Gentiles.
It's a big jump. Like, I'm not going to, but you can't escape that fact. These guys are like, hey, guys, we're going to go across this place that we are going to be not received well. Mm-hmm. Hop in the boat. Okay. and then you're one of the 14 who had enough guts to hop in the boat, and then this is going to happen? Ain't supposed to happen.
Yeah.
Because we're in the boat that's going to do, lack of a better, we're going to go do God's work.
And what are you talking, you of little faith? I left my family and
That's
I
right.
got on this stinking boat,
And here's where I'm going to die.
you know.
Okay, here's like you can't escape that truth that somebody in that boat was having. That you got to be kidding me. I left my family, I left my job, I left everything behind, and I'm going to die out here alone with a dude that's laying back there sleeping.
Don't you want to ask them, like, if you could go back in time right after this happened and be like, would you do it again?
Yeah.
Would you get back in the boat? You know, now that you know what you know, and now that you trust him to take care of.
I feel like if the journeys of the Gospels were like a video game, this would be like an autosave. Like
Yes,
after
exactly.
you get like past the Sea of Galilee moment,
Yep.
it's like boop, boop, boop.
You can't go
like
back
you've
before.
evolved. Yeah.
Well, and you kind of see that with Peter. I'm sure they were all at different levels, but you see that, I don't know, courage, faith, tenacity, and Peter being like, let's go. I'm getting out of the boat. Like, not only are you going to
Yeah.
calm this, but I'm coming to you and we're going to do this. And then, you know, of course, he looks at the wind and the waves and gets distracted and starts sinking. But I don't know. I love seeing their different personalities in that, of how they processed it. And I would imagine some were frustrated and might have in that moment answered, no, I would not do that again.
No, thank you. I want to go home.
Right.
Yeah.
But I do find like this for me, maybe because I do find so I'm kind of like, if I'm going to escape this world, it's going to probably be in a boat. So, I mean, that is kind of my escape. That's my safe place. That's where I go. And when things are really, really bad, if I can't even find escape, I can't even find it there as well. And sometimes I go out in the boat, I'll go, and then I don't even last any time. I'm like, I can't even, done. Okay, and so life can be that way for us, and even in it, we can go, man, come on, I got in the boat. Man, this isn't supposed to happen, and then we can go, this is not how this story was supposed to end. And what's cool on this one is that's not where the story even remotely ended.
Yeah.
And like this, I would say for me, like this, it is a meteorological story. He did stop the storm, and he goes on. I mean, there's no denying that. There is control of the weather, of things that I don't understand, okay, that are occurring. But for me, at the end of the day, when I look at it, for me, it says, Kay, your hair is not even moving at all. Not a single strand of it. And it should be. It should be. And I'm sorry it got disheveled for a second, but it was necessary for you to see this other thing, which is, even in the midst of that, the storm is not the reality, the calm is.
I see it as the boat in my mind is the scene right before this. It literally was his pulpit as he's standing on the boat preaching to the crowds, telling them all these stories. And it's like a interactive pulpit sermon for those in the boat. Like,
Let's do, what's it called? An object lesson.
yes, right. It's like the second sermon, part 2. Let me take a nap in between, but now it's part 2.
I think it's just, I don't know. I'm thinking about like the disciples, how, the church history, church legend, I don't know, it says, all but one died of unnatural causes, some, for the faith. And stuff like this is why.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can't go back. It's autosave in your brain.
Right. Well, and it's like when they're going to India, when they're going to these places, when they're going to the end of the world, they're being put on stakes and lit on fire and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, because I watched him calm the sea. Like I watched him, he was asleep and he got up and he's like, chill. And it stopped. So like, I don't have any choice but to share that.
I do think that is an important point. We always ask, what does this mean for us today? I think that is something that I want to take away from this is the act of remembrance. And it really is important for us as humans to stop and remember, especially if you're in the middle of one, maybe this next time when what allowed Peter to get out of the boat was remembering, oh wait, no, we've done this before, and he saved it, like he stopped things, and so I can now trust him to take this extra step out of the boat and see if it works for me. And that remembering is not something I'm always great at in the middle of those storms but I think it can be such a powerful tool for us to remember back in our own lives, remember in the lives of people around us where we've seen him do sort of miraculous things, so to speak, and calm those storms. And that will give us more faith to finish out like the disciples did, and to remember who he is and what he has done.
That's good.
Well, that would be a marvelous place to end there. And out of this, because it is, and I'm with Jonah, the one who's sitting here, not the one who's going to Nineveh, but that the disciples, they saw things. These things are real. Like this storm was calmed, real. Like that is key of this. Like that did occur, okay? But it also is just as key for us to remember if you happen to be listening to this and you're in the midst of whatever's going on. And then what does it say? That I came to give you peace, and a peace that surpasses all understanding. These things matter. Like this, it would be one thing to go, hey, I'm going to get you through the storm. He calmed the storm. There's a peace in the midst of that. Okay, and the disciples, they did see something, and they experienced things that you're like, they did a bad job of always answering well, going down the future, but then you go, it happened. And so in the midst of this, I like what Kay said. I don't really understand in the back of my head how often I might think back of the storm when I was growing up with my dad in the boat, and how many moments do I carry in my life of that? Maybe a whole lot. And the disciples, I could not disagree at all that they carried this with them forever. It is part of them. Yeah. And so these things and then out of it, when you'd go through this, I would go where we kind of tiptoed around. Some of these things, the honest answer, the disciples probably go, man, no, I don't want to go through that storm again, but I will.
Yeah.
And so it's good to know that wherever you're at, if you're in the peace and all the ocean is calm, that's great. And he's there. If you look and you're in there and you're frustrated because who you think's supposed to be steering the boat is looking like they're sound asleep, they may be looking sound asleep. Lazarus and Mary and Martha, they kind of didn't think Jesus' timing was too good in that story as well. But he came, and so here the answer is simply that the storms, they will calm. And there is one calmer, and that is who we're banking everything into, and that is that Jesus is who Jesus said he was, and that God is who God says he is, and that he is God. So we will live on that truth, and we know that is the fact, and we do thank y'all for joining us today. And it's good to be back. It's good to have Kay here. It's good to have Jonah. Roy, if you're listening to this,
don't come back.
Yeah, don't
Just
come
kidding.
back. You're uninvited.
That was entirely a joke.
That's a joke. Okay, hope y'all have a great day.
The Collage Podcast is produced by Bobby Jeffers in association with Feed My Sheep. Hosts are Jeff Stiegel, Karen Smith, Jonah Fox, and myself, Roy Rhodes. If you enjoy the podcast, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or on whatever platform you're listening. Or like, share, subscribe, and get in the comments if you're watching on YouTube. We'd love to hear from you, so shoot us an email at digitalmedia@feedmysheeptemple.org. And may you be nourished for your journey with God.